Dear visitors online and here in InnoLab of Slovak Design Center in Bratislava, I would like to welcome you at the beginning of our program for educators. We are starting one of events of project Year of Climate Care, Rok pre klímu 2022. The project itself, it's a network of several organizers from Slovakia, Austria, from Central Europe. I will introduce them at the end of our lecture, at the end of our today's event. Year of Climate Care is developing ideas of New European Bauhaus initiative, which is connecting some principles, sustainability, inclusiveness and aesthetic value. And the aim is to help go through some changes which are happening already and which are waiting for us connected with climate crisis. We chose to use maybe more positive attitude and we talk about climate care. This gives me opportunity to say to you, we have a Slido which where you can during the lecture put your questions. It's hashtag climate care. And when I speak about New European Bauhaus, I was a part of a group who created a so-called concept paper where education had really great part, and we were talking about formal education but also lifelong learning for people who are working in creative fields. And there are several concepts which are really interesting, which are really important, such as creating new curricula or relearning is really important. The hybrid skills or learning by doing. And we focus on higher education, as I said, and lifelong learning. For this start or for collaboration with educators, we chose a format of unconference. So during 2 days we are organizing unconference for educators, and part of it is a lecture. We were looking for some really functional example of an education program which already is working for several years, and we met for now only online Professor Prytula, who is head of Urban Future Master's Program at University of Applied Sciences. And sorry, some technical problems. Can I continue? Okay, so sorry for this. Mr. Prytula works at University of Applied Sciences, Potsdam, and as I mentioned, he runs Urban Studies Master's Program, and he is working also at the Institute for Urban Future. So I would like to give him a word, and he will explain us about the program Urban Futures and about some principles, and at the end of his lecture we can place questions also from audience here, but also from Slido, where you can ask your questions after hashtag climate care. So please, Mr. Prytula, present us your lecture. Welcome here.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I will share my screen. I hope you can see now the first slide of my presentation. Thank you very much for the invitation and the kind introduction to my person. I will talk to you about urban futures, as mentioned. And I will give you some background information about how the program has developed, and give also some samples of the results students are working on. How will we live in the future? There can be no certain answer to this question, but there are strategies and tools for dealing with uncertainties, for exploring developments and spaces of possibility, for developing scenarios of forecast, and for assessing the consequences of our actions. If one considers the major social development goals, such as the transformation to a carbon neutral in climate-adapted city, numerous complex research, development, and implementation tasks are associated with this. This enormous transformation, comparable only to the Industrial Revolution that established the beginning of the fossil regime, encompasses ecological, social, cultural, spatial, infrastructural, economical, and political aspects for which are no simple solutions. So therefore, the teaching of our program is addressing these questions. So what does it mean to study the future city? Today I would like to tell you more about this master program, which has been developed in the winter, or started in the winter of 2016. But first I want to give you some informational background about the general conditions of the program. The University of Applied Sciences in Potsdam is a young and small university, founded in 1991. There are currently around 3,600 students at the university who are supervised by around 100 professors. And around other 300 people are employed in administration, in workshops, in research projects. And in total, we have 5 faculties which offers 32 bachelor, master's, and bachelor degree programs. Most of them are quite practice-orientated. Central concern of our university is to strengthen its profile as a research university. The Urban Future Masters programs, as part of this, was conceptually developed by 3 new research professors who were assigned to the university in 2014 and into the newly founded Institute for Urban Applied Research of Urban Futures. In cooperation with practical partners from the municipality, from the business sector, from scientific institutions, we work on research projects for the sustainable transformation of our cities. This is a background which allows students a research-oriented study structure and direct participation in research and development processes within the framework of study projects, of internships, and master theses. The current research areas are compiled in 3 profile lines, as we call them: digital transformation, urban future, building society, and design, build, maintain. These 3 lines are encompassing also a couple of other bachelor and master degree programs and building big fields of our research. Interdisciplinary projects enable students and teachers from different departments and courses of study to work together. Under the guideline principle of research-based learning, students can familiarize themselves with the methods of application-oriented research at a very early stage. And currently there are 14 research professors with approximately 40 people working in research projects. What are the important challenges of urban change that we have to face? In conclusion, we see the following main objectives that are addressing in the masters, that we are also addressing in the master's program. This means the transformation to a sustainable city, the demographic change, and the development of new technologies and also the integration of those. Another strong driver of urban and social changes are the digital transformation. That means dealing with big data in the context of urban information and communication technologies like smart cities, but it means also their impact on all other kind of urban infrastructures, like the energy or the traffic system. And last but not least, all this takes place within a complex network of social actors or stakeholders, which are on the one hand part of the participation process, but also part of different social processes as social segregation, migration, or cultural diversity. So these are kind of basic questions which are forcing us to work in the master's program. Therefore, we see the city as a complex system. The sustainable design of urban living spaces requires a systematic understanding of these functionalities and interdependencies, as I've shown before. In the master program, we concentrate conceptually on 3 broad domains of the urban systems. That means the built city, that means sustainability, neighborhood development, sustainable infrastructure, all matters of energy and material flows. The second is the social city as a social cultural city system and encompasses the question of participation, demographic change, and also changes in attitudes and behavior. And the third domain is the digital city as an informational system, which has a main focus on big open data, smart citizen information, visualization, and digitized cultural assets. We are fully aware that the city consists of a multitude of other processes and structures, as social, cultural, or aesthetic practices, the knowledge of urban history, and all technical, technological, and economical domains. But the 3 domains of the urban systems that we are summarized, at least main parts of it. And what we try to teach and to learn about more is how they work together. So each of them building a kind of complex system, if not to say it's a network system of complex systems. And that's very important also for the students to get an understanding how those work in detail or in general context. This leads us to the central question of how complexity can be taught in a master program and what kind of qualification goals should be aimed for. We see at least 3 strong categories to distinguish here. The first is the interdisciplinary and transdisciplinarity as an essential scientific mode. The specialization of science has undoubtedly led us to numerous improvements and increased the efficiency of science. On the other hand, its differentiation has led us also to a partial loss of holistic view, and thus the analysis of the far-reaching consequences of implementation of scientific research and practice. Disciplinary research is characterized by the fact that all the aspects of the problems are taken apart and studied in the detail. The complexity of a problem is reduced by filtering out certain aspects and then described and analyzed them separately. However, problems in sustainability are characterized by a high degree of complexity, which can often not only be described by linear and detailed scientist practices. We also call them ill-defined problems or wicked problems. That means there's not a clean solution how to solve these problems. Disciplinary analysis reach its limits here. Inter- and transdisciplinarity is therefore seen as a necessary condition to address effectively the solution for real problems. And what do we understand by transdisciplinarity? Transdisciplinarity means that people outside of the science system who are directly or indirectly affected by the real life problem to be solved are involved in the problem-solving process. It also addresses ordinary people and stakeholders who have useful experience and knowledge. For the students, the benefit of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research is that through the interaction of different disciplines and mutual learning, an added value is created that goes beyond the mere addition of the knowledge of the individual disciplines. So the students also have to learn how to interact and communicate with each others and declaring what are the principles of their disciplines. The second category addresses the system, goal, and transformation knowledge. These qualification objectives are based on a scientific theoretical approach of transdisciplinary research and teaching as an essential scientific foundation for the operational implementation of the normative guiding principle of sustainable development. System knowledge means it's a knowledge about the complex and continued interrelationship of life-world problems and the social, ecological, economic levels behind, in between these dimensions. So it's about the knowledge, what is, and to understand the principle, how that works together to make it like it is. The second target is the target of knowledge, or the knowledge about assessment. This is knowledge about how norms can be justified and how the options of the three dimensions of sustainability can be interlinked in terms of sustainable states of nature, sustainable lifestyles, and so on. So this is the knowledge about what should be and what should not be. Essentially like, how to teach the principle of sustainability. And the third dimension is the transformation knowledge. It's the knowledge about how the goals can be achieved. That means how the transformation from the current to desired state can be designed and implemented. So it's the knowledge of getting from the current state to the desired state. It is useful for students to be able to distinguish between these three types of knowledge. And for us as teachers, it's very useful to find appropriate didactic and methodological tools to promote these competences. So we refer always in our lessons and seminars, and we discuss also with the students what level of knowledge we are addressing now and what for. And finally, the third category addresses all professional, key, and creative competences. So the classical qualification objectives. The professional competences have two levels or two dimensions. On the one hand, we want to improve the interdisciplinary knowledge of the students about the social, institutional, structural, and informational domains of the urban system, as we've shown before, these three directions. This is done in lectures, in modeling courses, and also it's integrated in the project classes. On the other hand, disciplinary and interdisciplinary professionals' competences build on the previous knowledge that the student gained in their previous bachelor degree programs. Students experience each other then as an important source of theoretical and methodological knowledge to each other. This can be individual, be deepened through certain classes, so the students have a large freedom to choose a part of the applicatory program, what they can study in further detail. Very important for us is also the second part of these objectives, the key competences. The key competences can be distinguished between subject-related and process-related areas. The subject-related key competences include, above all, methodological skills in the field of knowledge integration, future research, and how to deal with complexity and uncertainty in the limits of knowledge which they can prevent in these classes. The process-related key competences include the discussion and the competition of on the qualification to discuss things, and also conflict resolution skills, as well as management techniques, the organization of complex transformation projects, and the analysis of a large amount of data. So all skills which are needed to come to real transformation management. And last but not least, students must learn how innovation and processes can be created or be designed. Therefore, we teach methods in the master programs that are orientated according to the concept of design competence, which is widespread in the sustainability discourse. Design competence refers here to the creative ability to design new ideas for the future, that can be in the material sense of creating prototypes, doing aesthetic designs, visualizations, but it can also be in the sense of social shared visions, of mental prototypes, also can be in the design of social change processes. So it's very important for us to have these three competences in a good balanced way. And because students themselves come from a very different background, so we have architects, landscape architects, urban planners, but we also have designers from all kinds of fields like interaction design, product design, interface design. We have, but also all kinds of social sciences like from ethnological background, psychology, geography. So each of these students has their set of skills, and what we try to arrange is that they work together and exchange their skills on all these levels. So how do all these theoretical considerations become to a functional study program? For the implementation of the qualification goals in the study program concept, we have oriented ourselves on the so-called T model, where students can further develop their own disciplinary specialization. This is a pillar of the T in the generalist context that is a transverse bar of the T. So as an architect, maybe I have a strong knowledge in the built city, or as a psychologist, I have a strong knowledge in the social city. This is my pillar, which I can enhance and go in further details. And the master program with all the classes in complex city systems or in methods, it's the transverse bar. So that's a way how we try to combine deeper knowledge of a field of knowledge, but also combine them with the development of all these key and methodological skills. And that all leads together, and it's bound together in the project work. So we are forcing the students, so we have around 24 students each year to work in groups, and we have only a few rules, but one rule is that they don't work together with the same professional skill. So designer has to mix up with a social science, with an architect or urban planner, and vice versa. So they have really mixed groups where they can improve their interdisciplinary work. And then, of course, it's a question how all these theoretical consideration can put into practice. What are contemporary ways of learning? So how do we achieve the goals we are addressing? First of all, under the precondition that tasks in the urban context cannot a priori can be clearly defined. You remember the term of wicked problems. It means that students and teachers work together to identify and develop relevant questions. So we give them a framework, but we discuss quite a lot what are the problems in this framework, and also there we include, of course, people in the neighborhood or in companies which are facing these problems from an external point of view. Each student has expert knowledge through his or her formal degree and other work experience. Some of our students are very challenged already, and they work part-time in other jobs, and ideally each person brings their talents and skills on the table. That's very important for us, and they learn as much from each other than they learn from us. Our intention is to establish teaching, learning, and research on equal footing. That requires a lot of trust to each other and the courage to steer rather than to control. And last but not least, all this all this requires a high degree of initiative and self-organization. So the students have to commit themselves, and we give them a lot of freedom, but we are forcing them also to use this freedom in the way they want to develop. We call this also the Robinson principle. So you're put on the island and you have to solve the problem to surrender in terms of a scientific context. So as colorful our students are, as colorful we are. So we teach interdisciplinary in a team, sometimes even in team teaching, but we have a strong exchange to each other. And our backgrounds are as diverse as those of our students. We're coming from geography, from sociology, psychology, from architecture, from urban planning, from design, from information visualization, and from earth science. So we are addressing then with our experience some parts of them. We putting the puzzles into the play, and the students have to create their own picture, what we can offer them. Our teaching models are based on the following guiding questions, like how can the basic of modeling complex system in emergency can be taught? What are the methods for futurology? How do you work productively with the scientific text, and how do you can produce yourself scientific texts? How to deal with big data? All these kind of questions are addressed in various lectures and lessons we're doing. And we see our role as a teacher rather as mentor than as the people who knows things better. So we want to guide and steer research and work progresses, and provide an subject-specific and methodological knowledge in theory and practice. But the students themselves bring a lot of knowledge, and it's rather that we are or offering the playground and the rules, and then the students develop their ideas and their projects. And we also forcing and want to strengthen the students along a lifelong learning, because 4 semester or 2 years study program, it's far too short to really reach a very big impact, but we want to teach the students how they can learn and improve their lifelong learning. This picture gives you a short overview about some of the students disciplinary cultures like geographic, architecture and urbanism, social science, culture studies, media studies, regional planning, engineering, design. And the outer circle shows you the amount of applicants, and the inner circle shows you the amount of students which have been selected. So we have quite a high degree from architecture and design and cultural studies, but also from politics or even economic sciences. So it's really a big field of different disciplinary cultures. And that's how we then also started. We start in the autumn with a project week where we have a kind of short run master program in 1 week. So from each master class course, we have a short introduction for 2, 3, 4 hours. And one of these practices is that students have to explain their disciplinary cultures. So they have to figure out how they can gather in functional groups, and then they have to explain what does it mean to be a social scientist, or what does it mean to work in social work. So one is more practical orientated, one is more theoretical or science orientated, and so they have to declare themselves and describe what are the essential methods and attitudes and theoretical frameworks. That's also one part, an important part for us to create a kind of team building. So in this first study week, the students work from individuals to a team. They have to exchange very personal information, ideas, and they get to know each other very well, and have to conceptualize what they have learned before, and maybe what can they bring in, and what they put on the table for the master program. We have therefore created as a kind of playground annual teams. So we give students a lot of freedom to develop their themes in between these annual themes. So we started in the first 3 years with kind of smart city discourse. Also smart city in terms of small cities in the countryside. And in the third year, they even go to East Asia. They went to Taiwan to study the different connotation between smart cities in the Western and the Eastern sphere. Then we had in the fourth and fifth year rather neighborhood or quarter-orientated studies. What does it mean to make a neighborhood resilient? Or what does it mean to create a 2000-watt society in an area? And the current theme, it's about a kind of economic impact. What does business can provide for a sustainable future? So these are some examples of the work of the students in the first half year. They work very intense also to create ideas, kind of best case scenarios, and but also ideas how to improve the neighborhood or mobility systems, and the ideas following a methodology of visionary leadership, that students create idea, but also they create a timeline in which this idea can be realized. They have to think about stakeholders, they have to think about how to communicate their idea, and these then all come together in a poster. This is one, for example, for resilient Taipei. This is one for a process of urban design and participatory urban design, or even for some more kind of technical solutions like a fungi future farm, how in the neighborhood things can put together on a more smaller scale. So this is also very important for us to gather a lot of ideas, that students exchange what do they know already and then enhance to put it together. Based on this first half year, in the second half year, we have the big project, the so-called inter and transdisciplinary project, where we work with real actors, real stakeholders. And this was, these pictures are from the fourth year. The theme was resilience and transformation of neighborhoods. And I was teaching here with Alexandra Martini. She's a design teacher. And our theme was how a new developed quarter, like das neue Gartenfeld, the new garden field in north of Berlin for around 8,000 people, can be designed to be more resilient. So the investor is already made up a master plan, and the students get very familiar with all this planning and try to find still some gaps to improve this planning. So this is how this area looks like now. It's a former industrial site with this very beautiful industrial industry hall. And students then developed ideas like this, like a pavilion, because it will probably take 8 or 10 hours to build this new quarter. And so some people live already in the quarter, but new comes together and you have a lot of noise, you have a lot of stress. So what are the requirements of a healthy city? And so students then started with these kind of kiosk structure for consulting, but also where neighbors can meet each others and can connect each others. Another group was also working on a similar idea, how to deal with the open space of the public space. Especially it was the year of Corona where everything was locked down. So they invented a kind of toolbox for research where you can go into to part and have a new conception of your neighborhood. And the third group, for example, was very radical, working on central infrastructure, like what does the climate change means to water systems. And they made also a kind of diagram work to find out the relationships, what influences each others, and came up for some solutions how to improve the water system in a neighborhood. All these project results get gathered in an annual publication that is one of our goals. The students know that they have to work, they have to research and create a work which has to fulfill certain standards. So we publish their work in a yearly book, and you can also address them. They are on our internet, on our homepage, and this gives the students a result which they can prove that they have a scientific work, but it's also a good giveaway for the partners we work together, because students do interviews, they're asking other people to work for them as well. So therefore then they can get something back to improve the work. So it's part of this transdisciplinary dialogue we are having. And finally, this is one example of a master thesis. The students usually in the fourth semester or fifth semester, they start with their master thesis. And this is one of a former student for a neighborhood in Berlin, where he was looking how this neighborhood can be more inclusive. And he started first with a demographic research and putting together basic data and visualize them in this masterwork. Then he also created a kind of social network, also talking with people, stakeholders in place, and describing their interaction. And finally, he also developed a kind of spatial program and design, architectural design. But the master thesis is different as the students are, and so this is just one example. So last but not least, so what happens afterwards? What is our goal for this qualification? So we see, and this is my final slide for this lecture or for this talk, and we see our students as transformation managers. So they work in municipalities or in business or in housing companies or research centers with skills which they don't have coming from a disciplinary point of view. So they know much more about cross-disciplinary work because they practice cross-disciplinary work, and I think it's an essential, competence and knowledge people need to come to successful urban and societal transformations. Thank you very much. Now I'm curious about your questions and remarks.
Okay, thank you, Michael, very much. And this was really detailed insight into methodology of your program, and we are very thankful for it. And we have in room several pedagogues and people who are working in universities and academies in Slovakia. But also when you mentioned lifelong learning, I have to say that we have here also people who are not working in so-called formal education, which is a category which we are not sure if it still has a sense to distinguish like forms of education, because they should really collaborate. But this group of people, they are people from either culture centers or professional organizations who are dealing with education of people who are already in praxis. And thank you for mentioning also this connection. And before we have some questions in the room, I'm sure there will be a lot of them. I will encourage people who are online or even in the room to put into Slido under hashtag climate care some questions. And yes, like until we have first question here in the room, I will ask you about this, like if you spoke about lifelong education, and yes, like these older categories are formal, informal education. Do you have some significant long-term collaborations, I don't know, with culture centers or with really professional organizations who are working with this like further steps after formal education at the university?
Yes, we have part of our program is that the students have to do internship. So after we have actually the first year the students are in university, and then the second part of their study they have to do an internship. And since we are now in the 6th years, we have already gathered a lot of various organizations, and that has started to become a long-term relationship. So, like there's a big German research institution, Fraunhofer Institute, and they have the main branch is in Stuttgart. It's about working organization, and they have a branch here in Berlin for research and students. They start there with the internship, and then they become also staff members of their programs. So we also want to enhance that we get a good exchange and interweaveness between not only scientific, institutional, but also with the community, the administration of cities, or even of businesses. Like one of her students, she's working for the water companies in Berlin. Another student former student is working for mobility sector, also in administration. So it's really a kind of practical exchange in this field as well.
Yeah, so it gives also a lot of competencies. You were mentioning the creative competencies and the others, so it gives them opportunity to build them. So now I will look into room and ask who has a question, and I will repeat it. So please, we have participants of workshop. Yes, do we have a question? I think I will repeat the question for Michal.
The question is that I was really thank you for amazing presentation. You mentioned that your students are used to work basically in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary teams where each participant has particular knowledge. On the other hand, we have your diploma thesis. You showed us one example. Is it a problem for them to change their mind and to start to work independently on diploma thesis when they are used to work in teams, or how do you enable them to continue in this transdisciplinary approach in their own authorship of their own diploma thesis? Because it is very different approach of research.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I will repeat the question. It's from Ms. Tomčíková from Zvolen University, and you were mentioning that students are really used to work in interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary teams, that during the whole studies they are working with such methods, and but then at the end you were showing theses which are really like specialized, which are product of like individual work. So how students are dealing with this, that from after the years of experience of inter and transdisciplinary work, they should create really independently and individually such complex thing.
Yeah. Well, the students have the freedom to choose if they make their master thesis on their own or to work in a group. So we have some master theses as group work, where they also work interdisciplinary, but most of them choose to work on themselves. But then we're asking them to make a research concept and with what kind of methodology they want to work, like a scenario or interviews or with some design thinking tools and so on. So they have what they learn in the master program is kind of a kind of breakfast buffet, and then they have to choose what they use for the work. And mostly this work in the master thesis at least is a transdisciplinary work. So they really have interviews with people. It's not a research work on themselves, but it's really practical related. What is more difficult is then afterwards. It depends on the companies where they start working. For example, the student I have shown, he was trained from his bachelor. He's an architect. Then he makes this master program. In the end, with his internship, he went back to an architectural office, and then he also makes his master thesis quite close to this theme of architecture. So what we recognize is that maybe the time of 1 year strong exchange is too short to really implement strong interdisciplinary competences. So the students then, they tend to fall back to what they have learned in the bachelor, what they have trained, where they are safe.
Okay, we have another question.
Thank you. I'm here for the collective that has this interdisciplinary work, and we have a lot of misunderstandings. So if you have some kind of a warm-up where people try to learn one language together or share the languages together, because it's very hard to, because people who are designers and architects language structure. So if you kind of warm them up for the experience.
Okay, so you heard the question, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Now that's, I think, one of the main tasks of our master programs, because many people doing what we are teaching the master program after they have finished their master degree. So according to the problems they are facing in the company, they have to work inter and transdisciplinary. But we force them, or we give them the opportunity to do this in a safer space of the university. And that's also the feedback we get quite often from the students, that they really have learned so much more from each other, because they really have to, if they work in a group of 4, for example, for this water paradigm concept. So there was one was from politics, one was a designer, one was a social scientist, and the third one comes from, I think, urban planning. So they really have to explain each other what are the words, what's the meaning, because if you talk about complexity, it means in a different context, but something different. So that takes a long time, and sometimes it's frustrating because they have to talk, explain each other a lot. On the other hand, they learn quite close what does complexity means for an architect or for a designer or for a social scientist. So they training by doing. So we force them to work together, and they have to go through this process. And sometimes it works quite well or very well. Sometimes it works not optimized. That depends also on the students, how they take on. But I think it's a strong feedback from them of their learnings. That's a really because you only learn by doing things, and if you teach them by lectures, they hear it, but they don't understand maybe. But if they do it, then they see where's the problem and have to go through. I don't know if that answers your question, but
okay, thank you. And I got instruction from direction that I should repeat the questions from audience here for the stream. So yeah, the question was, if I remember it really correctly, from our facilitator from transdisciplinary collective Spolka, that they work with many disciplines, and sometimes they experience some misunderstandings, and like how to calibrate common language or how to understand each other, just really short. But we have a question already in Slido. I encourage everybody to put more questions there. We still have a few minutes. So I will read the question for you. Is the lifelong learning mandatory in Germany also for architects? And if not, do you think it should be? In Slovakia, it's not mandatory, just voluntary. Thank you.
Yes, it's mandatory. So in Germany, the architects' chambers are organized separately. So there's not a central organization, but each county has its chamber. But I think it started already, I don't know, 15 years ago or 20 years ago in Bavaria. So in southern German countries, with a program that architects would have working in practice, they have to visit some classes to gather some points of some credits. Like students gather credits in lessons, so you can choose if you want to attend a program in economics or in sustainable building or in physics. But even myself, I'm part of the Berlin Chamber of Architects. I should gather points, credits each year in order to be a member. This hasn't been controlled yet, fortunately, because I don't achieve it all the time, but it's mandatory, and I think it's a good program because it asks the people to improve themselves and like we have building information modeling or new technologies. So if you have been trained 20 years ago, you maybe can go on without this, but still then it's good sometimes to learn and to improve with actual knowledge. Yeah.
Okay, so I got like silent questions from the room, like who pays for these programs, for these mandatory programs? If it's like these local chambers or if it's like state or federal?
Well, partly it's run by the local chambers. So you as a participant, you don't have to pay, but partly you also have to pay. So as a member, for example, for I don't know, for a class in ecological building, to attend some lessons or to have site visits, you maybe pay like 60 or 100 euros as a member, and you pay double if you're not a member of the chamber. Okay. So depends on the amount of time, or also the chamber has to pay other people, specialists, to make this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So I will take one more question from the room because we have several minutes. So please, Georg, from University of Fine Arts.
Teachers, in this case, because it's here we have the trainers unit,
Mm-hmm.
and I would explicitly know more about what kind of profile the teachers would have in this terms of transdisciplinarity and 21st century skills.
Okay, so I will repeat for our listeners on the online. So it's a question about teachers, because now we have this training of trainers, and like what is the teacher's profile when we are talking about 21st century skills or skills for the future?
Well, the one question universities or institutions always have to face is the question of resources. So in this case, the Ministry of Science and the university agreed to create a new master program, and therefore 3 research professors were newly introduced at the university. So, and therefore this profile was then to choose one with a kind of more building background. This was me. One with a more psychology or social background. This was Tobias Schröder, and one with a kind of more big data informational background. This is Marian Dirk. So we 3 were especially chosen before the master program exists to create this master program. And then we also include other colleagues which are open-minded and interested, and we have a kind of exchange of teaching credits. So we have, if only we would teach, it would be very boring for the students. So we exchange with other teachers, but therefore they have to put in their capacity. So then we teach also for design or for architecture to exchange this. But that's it's a good question. What does it mean to be a good teacher for the 21st century skills? I think it needs a strong commitment also to exchange, so that we as teachers have a strong exchange about our discourses, and that we are not only go into the classroom, do our thing, and then we go out, but we developing the program together, but we also developing it further, and we have now a little change in some details. We put in, for example, a big data analysis or data science module, because it was missing so far. So we're doing some adaptations, and that needs a kind of openness in ourselves, that we are not only specialized in our field, but have also interest in other fields. For example, I've studied coaching psychology program as an architect. So separately, I have some ideas about social norms and so on. And my colleague Tobias Schröder, he's a psychology. He's studying psychology, but he is working a lot in sustainability, also for housing or sustainable mobility. So there's a kind of knowing each other a little bit about other fields of knowledge.
Yeah, we are facing that psychology is really important, like in this post-pandemic times, and somehow we learned about this field also on media a lot these days. So I dare to take few more minutes. We promised like to take 1 hour, but we have 2 interesting questions in Slido, which are totally like different fields. So one is, how are markets or institutions prepared for graduates with that interdisciplinary scope? Is there also education about how to involve this approach into them? Or, yeah, I think you get it.
Yeah, it's a good question. When we designed the master program, we did interviews with market players, like the head of urban planning, but also for mobility companies and so on. And then they asked, well, if I employ somebody who has a planning degree, I know what I get. If I employ somebody with urban futures, I don't know what I get because it's new. But what we can recognize now is that, especially what the qualification we offer is requested by the market. So people do it just on the job usually. They got not trained at university, and but the students of urban futures, they like the student I was showing this master thesis. If he would have done his master's thesis in architecture, he would be a good architect with skills of an architect. But doing the master program, he has also now knowledge about futurology or knowledge integration and transformation process, about social norms and all those kind of things which you don't learn as an architect. So now he's working in architectural practice, and he's not doing the classical architectural business as designing details and so on, but also the profession of architects or urban planning has changed. They're doing a lot more. They're doing participatory planning and so on. And so they need this kind of generalist. So they need some specialists, but also generalists. So the market, I think the market is ready, and the market looks for people who bring the skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe even we are ready, like the situation which is here already so urgent, it really needs people with new skills, with new roles. Okay, last question, which is short, and we are coming a little bit back to psychology topic. If you have experience of students who are not respecting a discipline of the other one enough, this is the question. Do you have an experience of students not respecting a discipline of the other one enough? How do you deal with this kind of situation if this happens?
Well, that is a self-regulatory process. So sometimes we have a very little degree of students which are not making their master. So it's like 8% or 10%. But usually they recognize quite early in the beginning of the master program that's not their program. So with the master program, we attend people who are open-minded like this, so that it works. And if somebody find out in the first weeks or months that's not really the right program, they choose another program, so they're leaving the program. We have also the situation that 2 students from the very first year, they were trained as in a planning degree, urban design. After the project in the first year, they leave the master programs. They say, well, we want it's a nice program, but we really want to make our master in urban planning. And they did their master in urban planning, and now they came back to the master of urban future to finish their degree here. So because they found, well, it's interesting to have both, to have these strong skills in my disciplinary but it's very attractive also to have a view over this, a bigger view like this. So that I think that's a kind of self-regulatory progress, because the students have to work in groups. So we say from the very first beginning, even before we announce the program, that you will work in groups. You don't work on your own. It's not like a classical university program where you go to lectures and you write your thesis and you do a lot of work on your own. No, you do a lot of work in groups. So therefore you have to learn how to deal with this. So, but we're quite happy that we have a very little rate of people who are leaving the master program.
Okay, great. So thank you, Michael. It was a really great insight into your methods, into your master's program, Urban Futures. We had here Professor Michal Prytula, architect, educator from the University of Applied Sciences, Potsdam. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. And I will remind that we just heard a lecture which belongs to Unconference for Educators, which is workshop devoted to education for future skills, for future caring about climate. So the project is Year of Climate Care, and I would like to thank for support to Franco-German Cultural Foundation and to Unique Cluster Bratislava. And yes, like I promised in the beginning, that I will say who are organizers and who are partners of this program. So this part of the whole year program was organized by Impact Academy or Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, Manifest 2020, Slovenská komora architektov, which is Slovak Chamber of Architects, and in collaboration with Slovenské centrum dizajnu, Slovak Design Center, and Inštitút pre pasívne domy, Institute for Passive Houses. And I will just remind again that this is only part of our network and part of our partners, and others are initiators of the whole project, the Year of Climate Care, Goethe Institute Bratislava and French Institute in Slovakia. And our other partners are Antenna, Network for Independent Culture, Nasuti Festival, Nova Cvernovka and Punkt organization. And they will organize other events during the whole year. So you can follow our website, yearofclimate.care. Thank you very much and goodbye.